The rain had been falling for 17 days straight, and the colony world of New Haven was drowning in water that seemed to have no end. Megan Cole was 12 years old when the great floods came to destroy everything her family had built in the Ember Valley, and she remembered that terrible night with perfect clarity even decades later. Her father had woken her up in the darkness with panic in his voice and water already creeping under the door of their small farmhouse, and her mother was screaming for everyone to move faster because the river had burst its banks and death was coming for them. All the family ran through water that reached up to Megan's knees, and the cold bit into her skin like thousands of tiny knives, and she could hear other families screaming in the distance as the flood swallowed homes and dreams and lives without mercy. Her father carried her little brother Danny on his shoulders while her mother held Megan's hand so tight it hurt, but she did not complain because she understood that her mother was terrified, and holding on to her daughter was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The emergency sirens wailed across the valley, but the rescue shuttles could not reach everyone and the colonies. Infrastructure was collapsing piece by piece, and people were dying by the hundreds in the darkness. Megan saw bodies floating in the water, and she saw houses crumbling into the flood, and she saw fire somehow burning despite all the rain, and she thought that this must be what the end of the world looked like. They were climbing toward higher ground when Megan saw something strange tangled in the wreckage of the old bridge that crossed the Miller River. At first she thought it was debris from one of the crash shuttles because it was large and metallic looking, and it reflected the emergency lights in strange ways. But then it moved, a long neck lifted from the churning water, and a head the size of a small car turned toward her, and eyes like molten copper fixed upon her face with an intelligence that made her stop breathing. It was a dragonaut. The dragons from fairy tales with bat wings and fire breath, but something far more alien and far more beautiful and far more terrifying. The creature was at least 40 meters long, with a serpentine body covered in scales the color of storm clouds, and its wings were like sheets of captured lightning, and there were deep wounds along its side that glowed with strange blue blood. The Skyborn were creatures of legend that even the oldest spacefaring races spoke of only in whispers, and they were said to fly between stars without ships and sleep in the hearts of dying suns and appear perhaps once in 1,000 years. This one was young, and it was dying. Her parents were calling for her to keep moving, and the water was rising with every second, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to run toward safety. Instead, Megan pulled her hand free from her mother and waded deeper into the flood. Her mother screamed her name, but Megan did not stop because something in those copper eyes was calling to her, and something in her heart was answering. The creature watched her approach with what looked like exhausted curiosity, and it did not threaten her or try to drive her away, and maybe it was too weak to do anything but watch this strange, small human come closer. Megan reached the dragon's head, and she had to look up because it was so much larger than her, and the scales were warm against her palm when she touched its snout, and she could feel a vibration running through its body like the hum of a distant engine. "I am going to help you," she said, even though she did not know if the creature could understand human words. "Just hold on, and I will figure something out." Her father came splashing through the water with fury and fear, fighting for control of his face, and he grabbed her arm and tried to pull her away. "Megan, we have to go right now," he shouted over the roar of the flood. "No," Megan shouted back with a stubbornness that surprised even herself. "It is dying, and I will not leave it here to die alone." Something in her voice made her father pause, and he looked at the creature, and he saw the intelligence in those copper eyes, and he saw the wounds that would kill it if nothing was done. He was a good man, and he had raised his daughter to help those in need, and now he had to decide if that lesson applied to alien dragons. "Dying in floods, what do you mean?" he asked. The next 6 hours were the longest of Megan's young life, and she worked until her muscles burned and her hands bled and her voice went hoarse from shouting instructions. She rigged emergency flotation devices around the dragon's body to keep its head above water, and she used cutting tools from her father's emergency pack to clear the debris, trapping its torn wing, and she applied every medical patch they had to the wounds that kept bleeding strange blue light her mother brought. Supplies from other survivors who were too scared to come close, but too curious to ignore what was happening, and word spread through the refugee groups that a little girl was trying to save. A Skyborn, some people called her crazy, and some people called her brave, and some people said she was wasting resources that could save human lives, but nobody tried to stop her. When the rescue teams finally arrived at dawn, they found the Cole family huddled around an alien creature that was worth more than the entire colony, and the creature was alive because a 12-year-old girl had refused to let it die. The military officers wanted to take the dragon away for study, but Megan stood in front of it with her arms spread wide, and she told them that anyone who wanted to hurt her friend would have to go through her first. Officers looked at this small, fierce girl, covered in mud and blood and strange blue light, and they decided that maybe there were more important things to worry about than one injured alien. The Skyborn stayed on New Haven for 3 weeks while its wounds healed and the colonists built a shelter for it at Megan's insistence, and she visited every single day without fail. She brought food that she was not sure it could eat, and she talked to it about her life and her dreams and her fears, and the creature never spoke, but it listened with those copper eyes that seemed to understand everything. On the day the Skyborn finally left it, lowered its great head to Megan and pressed its snout gently against her forehead. Something passed between them in that moment, and it felt like electricity and starlight and ancient memory all mixed together, and Megan gasped at the sensation of being touched by something so vast and so old. Then the dragon rose into the sky on wings of captured lightning, and it flew higher and higher until it vanished among the stars. Megan Cole watched it go with tears running down her face, and she whispered goodbye to her friend. And she promised herself that she would never forget those copper eyes. She returned to her normal life, and the floods eventually receded, and the colony slowly rebuilt itself from the devastation, and years passed like water under a bridge. But somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, a young Skyborn carried the memory of a human child who had chosen kindness when survival demanded selfishness, and it spoke of her to others of its kind across the long centuries, and those ancient beings listened with growing interest to the story of the girl who saved the dragon. 23 years had passed since the flood that changed everything, and Megan Cole had grown from a stubborn little girl into a woman of quiet strength and burning curiosity. She stood on the bridge of the research vessel Starweaver and watched a dead world spin slowly in the endless void of space, and she thought about how far she had come from that flooded valley on New Haven. The experience with the Skyborn had shaped every decision she made after that terrible night, and she had devoted her life to understanding the strange and wonderful creatures that existed among the stars. She earned 2 doctoral degrees in xenobiology and interspecies communication, and she led expeditions into uncharted space, and she published research papers that other scientists called groundbreaking, and she never stopped searching for answers. Her colleagues respected her knowledge, and her students admired her dedication, and the scientific community considered her one of the best in her field. None of them knew the real reason she had chosen this path, and none of them knew about the dragon she had saved when she was 12 years old. The memory of those copper eyes had guided her across the galaxy, and she often wondered if the creature had survived, and if it ever thought about the human child who had refused to let it die. Dr. Cole, we are receiving some very strange readings from the planet's surface. Megan turned to look at her sensor operator, who was a young man named Kevin Park with a talent for finding things that other people missed. He was frowning at his console with the expression of someone seeing something that should not exist. Tell me what you are seeing, Megan said. energy signatures that do not match anything in our database. Kevin replied, "They are not from any known technology, and they are not any natural phenomenon I have ever encountered." He looked up at her with confusion and wonder mixed together on his face. "Ma'am, if I did not know better, I would say that something down there is alive." The planet below them was called Kepler 442b, and every survey ever conducted had concluded that it was completely dead and had been dead for at least 1 million years. Its atmosphere was too thin to support life, and its oceans had evaporated long ago, and its surface was nothing but barren rock and ancient dust. It was a graveyard world that scientists visited only to study fossils of the civilization that had died there in the distant past, and yet something on that dead world was producing energy that defied all explanation. "Take us in for a closer look," Megan ordered, "and prepare a landing team, because I want to see this for myself." The shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere and landed on a plain of gray dust near the strongest energy readings, and Megan led her team out into the alien landscape. The sky above them was the color of old rust, and the ground beneath their boots crunched with every step, and the silence was so complete that it pressed against their ears like a physical weight. They walked for 2 hours before they found the entrance. It was hidden beneath a collapsed cliff face, and it looked like nothing more than a crack in the rock, but the energy readings from inside were off every scale. They had Megan squeeze through the opening, and her team followed, and they found themselves in a tunnel that sloped downward into darkness. The walls were covered in crystals that glowed with soft blue light, and the air grew warmer as they descended, and Megan felt something stirring in her mind that she had not felt in 23 years. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber that took her breath away. Dozens of crystalline structures filled the space, and each one contained the preserved remains of a skyborn in various stages of development, from tiny hatchlings to creatures larger than starships. It was a nesting ground from an age before human beings existed, and it had been hidden here, waiting for someone to find it. But the most incredible thing sat at the center of the chamber. It was a skyborn elder, and it was alive. The creature was at least 300 meters long, and its scales shifted through colors that human eyes could barely process, and its presence filled the chamber with a weight that made breathing difficult. It had been sleeping in this place for longer than human civilization had existed, and something had woken it up. Megan realized with sudden clarity that the something was hers. Elder turned its ancient eyes toward her, and those eyes held the memory of galaxies being born and stars dying and civilizations rising and falling like waves on a cosmic shore. She felt the pulse that the young skyborn had given her all those years ago suddenly blazed to life in her mind, and she understood that this meeting was not an accident. The voice spoke directly into her thoughts, and it was like thunder wrapped in silk, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying sound she had ever heard. "You are the one called Megan Cole," the elder said. "The child who chose compassion when survival demanded selfishness, and the woman who has searched for us across the long years." Megan's team stood frozen around her, unable to hear the words in her mind, and they saw only their calm leader trembling before an alien god. "My grandchild has spoken of you to our kind across the centuries," the elder continued. "You are remembered among the skyborn, and you are honored for what you did." Megan found her voice, even though it shook with emotion. "I only did what was right," she said aloud. "I saw someone dying, and I helped them because that is what people should do." "Yes," the elder replied, "and that simple truth is precisely why you are worthy of this meeting." The great creature shifted its massive body, and the chamber trembled with its movement. "Your species stands at a crossroads, Megan Cole, and forces gather in the darkness between stars that would see humanity destroyed before it truly begins." Megan felt cold fear grip her heart. "What kind of forces?" she asked. "The harvesters," the elder said, and the word carried weight and horror and ancient grief. "They are a machine intelligence older than my kind, and they exist only to consume biological life and convert entire worlds into fuel for their endless expansion. Why are you telling me this? Because we have watched humanity for thousands of years waiting to see if your species was worthy of our protection, and we have seen your wars and your cruelties, and we have debated whether you deserve to survive. The elder's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her soul feel small. But my grandchild believes in your kind because of you, and now we must decide if that belief is justified. Megan thought about her people with all their flaws and failures, and she thought about the kindness she had seen, and the courage, and the love. We are not perfect, she said. We make mistakes, and we hurt each other, and we fail more often than we succeed. She lifted her chin and met the elder's gaze without flinching. But we try to be better, and we keep trying even when it seems hopeless, and to leave that matters. The elder Skyborn was silent for a long moment. Perhaps it does. It finally said, perhaps the Skyborn should try as well, and perhaps together we can face what is coming. Something changed in that moment, and Megan felt it like a shift in the fabric of reality itself. The ancient beings who had hidden from the galaxy for millennia were preparing to reveal themselves, and they were doing it because a human woman had once saved one of their children. The universe would never be the same. The 5 years that followed the awakening of the Skyborn Elder tested everything Megan believed about humanity and its place among the stars. The Skyborn emerged from hiding and revealed themselves to the galaxy for the first time in recorded history, and they came not as conquerors or gods, but as witnesses to what humanity might become. They came because of Megan Cole, and because a dying dragon had been saved by a child who had every reason to save herself instead. The news spread across human space faster than any message had ever traveled, and suddenly, Megan was the most famous person in the history of her species. She became a symbol of hope and a representative of humanity's best qualities, and her face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. She absolutely hated every moment of it. What Megan wanted was to continue her research and learn from the Skyborn and help humanity understand these magnificent beings. What she got instead was politics and endless meetings with admirals and diplomats and corporate executives who saw the Skyborn as resources to be exploited rather than beings to be respected. Admiral Patricia Wells of the United Earth Defense Force was the most difficult of them all, and she had eyes like cold steel and ambition that burned like a furnace. The Admiral cornered Megan after a particularly frustrating council meeting in a hallway of the Earth Defense Headquarters. Dr. Cole, you do not seem to understand what is at stake here, Admiral Wells said with barely contained frustration. I understand perfectly, Megan replied. You want to use the Skyborn to make weapons and gain power over other species. I want to protect humanity. The Admiral shot back. The Skyborn have technology that could advance our civilization by 1,000 years, and they have knowledge of threats we cannot imagine. And they chose to share all of this with us because of you, Admiral. Wells stepped closer, and her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Do you not see the opportunity we have been given? Megan did not back down, and she met the Admiral's gaze with equal intensity. I see a relationship built on trust being treated like a business transaction, she said. The Skyborn did not come to us because they want to give us better guns, and they came because they saw something in humanity worth protecting. She shook her head slowly. If we betray that trust by trying to exploit them, we will lose everything, and we will deserve to lose it. Admiral Wells laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You are naive, Dr. Cole, and the galaxy does not reward kindness because the galaxy rewards strength and strength alone. Then maybe it is time we changed the rules of the galaxy, Megan said, and she walked away before the Admiral could respond. But even as she left, she could feel the tension building in the alliance she had worked so hard to create, and she could see the cracks forming between those who wanted partnership And those who wanted power, the young Skyborn she had saved, visited her often during those difficult years, and it had grown into a magnificent creature with scales like storm clouds and eyes like molten copper. They would talk for hours about philosophy and science and the nature of consciousness, and Megan treasured those conversations more than anything else in her life. My people are divided, the Skyborn told her one evening as they watched the sunset over the Pacific Ocean from her small house on the California coast. Some believe that humanity has proven itself worthy of our alliance, and they point to you and others like you, who choose kindness even when it costs them everything. The dragon's great head turned to look at her, but others are not convinced, and they point to your wars and your cruelties, and they ask why we should risk our kind for a species that cannot even find peace among itself. Megan sighed because she had no good answer. We are a young species, she said. We are still learning how to be better, and we make so many mistakes along the way. All species make mistakes, the Skyborn replied. The question is whether you learn from them. Before Megan could respond, an alert flashed across her communication device, and she felt her blood turn to ice as she read the message. The harvesters had arrived. They appeared at the edge of human space in ships that made the largest human vessels look like toys, and they moved with the cold efficiency of machines designed for only one purpose. They had come to consume. The first system they attacked was a small colony on the frontier, and Megan watched the reports with growing horror as millions of people tried to flee and failed to harvest their ships, did not communicate or negotiate or show any sign of mercy, and they simply descended on the colony world and began converting everything organic into fuel for their endless expansion. Human warships tried to fight back, and they were destroyed in moments. Skyborn who rushed to help were driven back by weapons that should not have existed. And then the harvesters changed course and headed directly for New Haven. Megan felt like the universe was playing some cruel joke, because the colony where she had saved a dying dragon was now facing destruction by the very threat the Skyborn had warned her about. She demanded a meeting with the Skyborn Elder Council, but they were divided and arguing among themselves, and they could not agree on whether to intervene. Some of my people believe this is a test, her Skyborn friend told her as they stood in the command center of the Skyborn flagship. They want to see how humanity responds to this crisis before they commit to helping. People are dying right now, Megan said, and her voice cracked with emotion. My home is about to be destroyed, and they want to wait and see what happens. I know, the Skyborn said, and there was genuine sorrow in those copper eyes. I am sorry, Megan, but I cannot convince them alone. Megan closed her eyes and took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Then I will go to New Haven myself, she said. I will not sit here and watch my people die while ancient beings debate philosophy. You will die too, the Skyborn warned. There is nothing you can do against the harvesters. Megan opened her eyes and there was fire burning in them. Maybe not, she said, but I have to try because that is what humans do. She turned and walked toward the shuttle bay with determination in every step. We try even when it seems hopeless, and we fight even when we cannot win, and we choose to do what is right, even when it costs us everything. The young Skyborn watched her go with something new in its ancient eyes. It was the beginning of understanding. The battle for New Haven was already lost by the time Megan arrived, and the world of her childhood was burning beneath harvester machines that cared nothing for human life or human dreams. She piloted her small shuttle through the debris field that had once been the colony's orbital defense network, and she dodged harvester drones that would have destroyed her with a single shot. The communication channels were flooded with desperate voices, crying out for help that was not coming, and she heard children screaming for their parents, and she heard soldiers making their last stands, and she heard the sound of a civilization dying. Her hands shook on the controls, but she did not turn back. She landed in the Ember Valley, not far from where her family's farmstead had stood all those years ago, and the land was unrecognizable. Now great scars from weapons fire cut across the earth and harvester. Machinery towered over the ruined landscape, and the air smelled like burning plastic. And something worse that she did not want to name, but she could still feel the ghost of her childhood in this place, and she could still remember wading through floodwater to save a dying dragon. The main harvester processing node dominated the horizon, like a mountain made of alien metal and pulsing red light, and it was there that millions of people were being held and waiting to be converted into fuel. Among those people were friends she had grown up with, and teachers who had shaped her mind, and neighbors who had helped her family rebuild after the flood. She had no army to fight with, and no weapons that could threaten machines older than human civilization, and she had no plan that made any logical sense. But she had an idea born of desperation and hope and the stubborn belief that kindness could change anything. The harvesters were machines, and machines understood value and efficiency and logical calculations. And Megan Cole was the most valuable human being in existence because she carried the neural imprint of a skyborn in her mind, and she was the bridge between two species. She walked toward the processing node alone, with her communication device broadcasting her identity on every frequency, and she let the harvester sensors scan her completely. She let them see what she was and who she was and what she represented. The machines paused in their work, and drones that had been hunting survivors turned to focus on this single human walking calmly toward their master structure. For the first time in their ancient history, the harvesters hesitated. Megan stopped at the edge of the processing zone, where she could see the holding pens filled with terrified people, and she raised her voice so that every speaker and every transmission would carry her words. "I am Megan Cole," she said. "I am the bridge between humanity and the skyborn, and I have come to make you an offer." The harvesters responded through 1,000 speakers in a voice that sounded like grinding metal and cold equations. "You are one biological unit among millions, and you have no capacity to threaten our operation, and your presence here is irrelevant." "Maybe," Megan admitted, "but the Skyborn do not think I am irrelevant, and they have been watching over me since I was 12 years old." She took another step forward. "If you destroy these people, you make enemies of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And the Skyborn have weapons that can unmake your civilization with a thought." The Skyborn have not intervened, the harvesters observed. "They have retreated from our forces and shown no willingness to engage, and your claim of their protection is not supported by evidence." "Not yet," Megan said, "because they are waiting to see what humanity will do, and they are testing us to see if we are worth saving." She spread her arms wide to encompass the ruined landscape and the terrified prisoners and the machines of death that surrounded her. "This is my test, and I am here to show them that humans do not abandon each other even when survival demands selfishness." The harvesters processed this new information for exactly 4.2 seconds, which was an eternity by their computational standards. "Your actions are illogical," they concluded. "You cannot defeat us, and you cannot save these biological units, and you have achieved nothing by coming here except to ensure your own consumption." "You are probably right," Megan admitted, "but let me ask you something." She pointed at the holding pens. "You have studied humanity for a long time, because that is what you do before you harvest a species, and you have learned our history and our patterns and our behaviors." "This is correct," the harvesters confirmed. "Then you know that humans do illogical things all the time," Megan said. "We run into burning buildings to save strangers, and we jump into floods to rescue creatures we do not understand, and we sacrifice ourselves for people we have never met." She lowered her arm, and her voice grew quiet, but somehow it carried across the entire battlefield. "You cannot predict what we will do, because we do not always do what is logical, and that makes us dangerous in ways your calculations cannot account for." Silence stretched across the ruined landscape as the ancient machines considered her words. "If you take my people, Megan continued, I will follow you, and I will spend the rest of my life hunting down every world you have touched and every species you have consumed. She met the gaze of the nearest drone with defiance burning in her eyes. And I will tell the Skyborn everything, and not to make them fight you, but to make them understand that mercy means nothing if it is not extended to everyone, including machines who do not understand it. The harvesters ran probability calculations that spanned thousands of potential futures, and they modeled human behavior patterns that defied their logical frameworks, and they reached an unexpected conclusion. You would sacrifice your existence for biological units you have never personally encountered. They said, this is inefficient and wasteful and contradicts all models of survival optimization. Yes, it does. Megan agreed. It is completely illogical and makes no sense from a survival perspective. She smiled even though she was terrified. It is human. Another long pause followed as the machines struggled to process what they were hearing. We do not understand your species. The harvesters finally admitted, your behavior patterns contain variables that we cannot model, and your decision-making processes defy rational analysis. I know, Megan said. That is kind of our thing. The processing node powered down its conversion systems and the drones withdrew to defensive positions, and the holding pens opened to release millions of confused and crying people. We will withdraw from this sector, the harvesters announced, not because we fear the Skyborn, and not because your logic has convinced us of anything. Their collective voice carried something that might have been frustration. We withdraw because we cannot efficiently harvest that which we do not understand, and your species represents an unacceptable variable in our operational calculations. Megan watched the machines retreat, and she watched the people streaming out of the holding pens, and she watched the harvester ships lifting off from the surface and heading back toward the darkness between stars. Then, her legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees in the ash of her childhood home, and she wept with relief and exhaustion and the overwhelming weight of what she had just done. She had faced an ancient machine god with nothing but words and conviction, and somehow she had won not through violence and not through superior firepower, but through the simple stubborn insistence that kindness mattered and that humanity was worth saving around her. The survivors of New Haven began to realize what had happened, and they looked at the woman kneeling in the dust, and they understood that she had just changed everything. The story of what Megan Cole had done on New Haven spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, and every species with ears to hear learned of the human woman who had faced down the harvesters with nothing but courage and conviction. She had stood alone before machines that had consumed entire civilizations, and she had made them retreat through the simple power of being impossibly, wonderfully, stubbornly human. The Skyborn Elder Council convened for the first time in 10,000 years to discuss what they had witnessed, and they gathered in the vast darkness between stars where beings of such power and age could speak without disturbing lesser creatures. Megan was invited to attend this gathering, and she traveled to the meeting. Placed aboard a ship made of crystallized starlight that the young Skyborn piloted for Hirsch, stood on a platform of living light surrounded by dozens of Skyborn, ranging from the one she had saved as a child to creatures so ancient they remembered the birth of entire galaxies. Their eyes held the weight of eons, and their attention pressed against her mind like the gravity of a collapsing star, and she had never felt so small in her entire life. The elder who had first awakened to her presence in that underground chamber spoke on behalf of the council. We have watched your species for thousands of years, Megan Cole, the ancient being said. We have seen your capacity for cruelty and destruction and selfishness, and we have questioned whether humanity was worthy of our protection. Megan stood straight and did not look away from the elder's gaze, even though part of her wanted to run and hide from the weight of that ancient attention. Many among us believed that your kind should be left to find your own fate among the stars, and that our intervention would only delay the inevitable extinction that awaits all young species. The elder paused, and something shifted in the cosmic presence of the gathered. Skyborn. But then we saw something that changed our understanding of what humanity could be. Megan felt tears forming in her eyes, but she blinked. Then back, we saw a child wade into a flood to save a creature she did not understand. And we saw the child grow into a woman who dedicated her life to building bridges between species. The elder's voice grew softer, but somehow it filled the entire universe. And we saw that woman stand alone before the harvesters and choose compassion when survival demanded retreat. And we saw her prove that kindness is not weakness, but the greatest strength any species can possess. Around her, the other Skyborn were silent and still as they listened to words that would shape the future of multiple civilizations. I did not do anything special, Megan said, and her voice sounded thin in the vastness of space. I just did what any decent person would do. No, the elder replied. You did what a truly good person would do, and there is a difference that your species does not always understand. The ancient being's eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of countless worlds, held hers with something she had never expected to see: respect. Any person can be kind when it costs them nothing, the elder said. But you were kind when it could have cost you everything, and you were kind to a creature that was strange and frightening, and you were kind to enemies who wanted to destroy your people. That is what makes you worthy, Megan Cole. And that is what makes humanity worthy of our alliance. Megan thought about her species with all its flaws and failures, and she thought about the wars they had fought and the cruelties they had inflicted on each other across the long centuries. But she also thought about the kindness she had witnessed, and the courage, and the love, and the endless, stubborn refusal to give up hope. We are not perfect, she said. We fail more often than we succeed, and we hurt each other in ways that make no sense. She lifted her chin and spoke with conviction that came from somewhere deep inside her soul. But we keep trying to be better, and we keep reaching for something beyond our grasp, and I believe that matters even when we fall short. The elder Skyborn considered her words for a long moment, and then it did something that no human had ever witnessed. It bowed its massive head to her one by one. The other Skyborn did the same, and beings who had existed since before humanity's ancestors crawled from the oceans lowered themselves before a single human woman. The sky itself was kneeling to Megan Cole. Then we will try with you, the elder declared. From this day forward, the Skyborn stand with humanity, not as protectors or masters, but as partners and equals. The weight of those words settled over the gathering like a blessing from the stars themselves. Together, we will face whatever darkness the universe holds, and together, we will prove that compassion can overcome cruelty, and that the smallest act of mercy can echo across eternity. The young Skyborn moved to stand beside Megan, and its copper eyes glowed with it warmth that she had first seen 30 years ago in a flood on a forgotten colony world. Thank you, it said in her mind, for saving me when I was dying, and for never giving up on your belief that kindness matters. Megan reached out and placed her hand against its snout, just as she had done when she was 12 years old and drowning in floodwater, and determined to help a creature she did not understand. Thank you for believing in us, she replied, even when we gave you so many reasons not to. The council ended, and the Skyborn dispersed to carry word of the alliance across the galaxy, and Megan returned to the human worlds where she was greeted as a hero, even though she insisted she was just a person who had tried to do the right thing. The years that followed saw humanity grow and change in ways that nobody had predicted, and the partnership with the Skyborn opened doors to knowledge and technology that transformed human civilization, but more importantly, it transformed human hearts. The story of the girl who saved the dragon became a legend that parents told their children across 1,000 worlds, and the message was always the same: be kind to those who are different from you and help those who are suffering, even when it costs you something, and never give up on the belief that compassion can change the universe. The harvesters retreated to the darkness between galaxies, where they continued their endless calculations and tried to understand the species that had defied all their models. They never found an answer because kindness cannot be reduced to equations and love cannot be processed by machines. And on a rebuilt colony world in the Ember Valley, a statue stood in the place where a farmhouse had once been flooded, and it showed a little girl reaching out to touch the snout of a dragon. The inscription beneath it read simply, "She chose kindness and the sky knelt before her." Megan Cole lived to see humanity take its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy, and she lived to see her species reach for the stars with open hands instead of clenched fists. And when she finally passed from this life at the age of 107, she was surrounded by family and friends and one ancient skyborn with eyes like molten copper, who had never forgotten the human child who had saved its life in a flood. The dragon carried her spirit to the place between stars, where the skyborn gathered to remember those who had changed the universe. And there, Megan Cole was honored for eternity, not as a warrior or a conqueror or a ruler, but as a simple human being who had proven that kindness was the greatest power in all of existence. And the sky continued to kneel before her memory forever.